welcome to my channel. My name is Binja. This is the African Cocktail. I am so excited that you're here. Take my word for it. You don't want to suffer like me. You do not want to suffer like me, okay? I deserve Adele. I deserve Adele. And I'm just telling you, before you get on that flight, if you don't think you can handle that, do not come. Can we have a little commotion for the skirt? Hola mes amours, welcome to my channel. Today's topic is a little heavy. It is a little heavy. So before we get into it, I'm gonna encourage you, hit that subscribe button, like this video, and as we discuss, feel free to comment below. Let me know what you think. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Have you had the same experience? Let's talk. I do not intend on being controversial, but let's dive in. So it's been about a year and a half since I moved from Boston, Massachusetts in the US to Kinshasa in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Now, in this year and a half period, I have actually visited other countries. So when I talk about Africa, I'm mainly talking about my experiences in Southern, Central, and Eastern Africa. So I've been to Namibia, Zimbabwe, Kenya, and again the DRC over the last year and a half. And it is from these experiences that I'm drawing my current observations on the topic at hand today. If you've seen the title, today we're talking about things they never tell you or they do not emphasize enough when moving back to Africa. So I'm gonna let you know. So if you're deciding to move back to Africa, you have the information. There is no surprise. I'm trying to give you as much as I can so that you're coming in with your eyes wide open. So I'm gonna give you a little bit of a backstory. I'm gonna give you a little bit of my story. So August 2020, I landed in Kinshasa. This wasn't my first time in Africa. I was born in Kenya. I have lived on the continent. I had gone off to college and lived in Boston for 12 years. And within those 12 years, I had been back and forth on the continent multiple times. So it's not like I had gone away and then was just coming back, like trying to be flat-footed after years and years of never having stepped foot. That was not the case. I was back on the continent pretty much every other year. So, that being said, I packed my bags from Boston and decided to make my way to Kinshasa during the pandemic. Was that a smart idea? Check out my vlog. I'm gonna make sure to link it down below so you can see the struggles. What I will say is, if you're thinking about moving, one of the very first things that I don't think people tell you enough of is save. Save as much money as you can. Put as much money as you can to the side. My move on its own, just moving my boxes, moving my luggage, it cost over $5,000. Guys, I'm a single woman. My father is not Bill Gates, and he sure as hell did not cover my trip. So if you're going to just decide to pick up your life from one continent to another, I cannot overstress the importance of saving. That's number one thing they don't tell you, or they don't tell you enough. The other thing that you need to know about when moving to the continent is that it is a very expensive place to live. I can speak for Kinshasa specifically. Kinshasa is probably one of the most expensive cities on the continent. Some of the prices that we have here in Kinshasa do not make sense to me. For example, and I'll start with an example that a lot of the ladies can relate to. If you want to buy like hair removal products, generally they cost $7 to $8 in most places. In the Congo, they cost about $14 to $20. So literally double the price. And that is one thing that you have to realize when you're coming back on the continent. Depending on the country that you end up staying in, some countries just import everything, and you as a consumer end up eating a lot of that cost because the price tags will be doubled or tripled in some cases, because you have to carry the burden of the import tax, you have to carry the burden of the state or the local tax. So at the end of the day, you're paying 2 to 3 times what you would pay in other European or American countries. So just bear in mind that, like, I had to get myself to the point where I either bit the bullet and just purchased what I needed, or literally just resigned myself to never buying it. And I'll give you guys an example. Haagen-Dazs, the ice cream, generally about $5 to $8 US. In Kinshasa, it's about 14 plus US. 14 US for one like pot of Haagen-Dazs ice cream. So I've just resigned that I'm never gonna buy Haagen-Dazs ice cream here. There's no way I'm paying 14 US for a tub of ice cream. And I don't mean like a tub or a tub. I mean just like the regular sized ice cream, like little pots. Why am I paying $14 for that? So that's just an example of just how everyday goods cost 2 to 3 times the amount. Communication is also very expensive. I traveled from Kinshasa to Namibia to Zimbabwe to Nairobi in Kenya, and all of these different places required different SIM cards. So factoring purchase of a SIM card, each of these countries required their own version of data. So if it was MTN or if it was Econet, I think that's what they have in Zimbabwe, or if it was Safaricom in Kenya, I had to purchase all of the SIM cards plus data plus airtime for making calls. Now, generally, I've lived in Geneva, I've also lived in Boston in the States. Generally, you have like unlimited plans, but those are not commonplace here. So commonplace is you'll buy your set of gigabytes for your internet, then you'll buy your calling airtime or units depending on where you live, and that's what you're going to use for calling. So those are 2 separate purchases. And honestly, for like a month worth of data, you could run up to $150 plus. And I am a heavy internet user. I know that, like I keep telling you guys, I worked in tech, so I try to continually stay connected. And in all honesty, that to me is one of my biggest frustrations. They do not tell you just how difficult it is to communicate on the continent and just how expensive it is. If you go to a country like Kenya, I think they figured it out, but of course you still have the pricing barriers. And if you go to countries like Zimbabwe or Kinshasa, where communication is not something that these countries are great at, you might end up paying through the nose just to get connected to the internet. And the internet that you get might not even work half the time. So you'd be paying like $50 to $100 a month for internet, and then half the time, if there's electricity shortage, you don't get Wi-Fi. If there's electricity shortage, your phone cannot connect to the cell towers. So you get a lot of issues like that along the way, and honestly, it becomes so frustrating to try and communicate. And I just want to stress on that, because if you're somebody who's like a heavy data user, you're somebody who's used to continually being connected, picking up the phone, sending text messages, sending WhatsApps as you go, in all honesty, you might struggle, because just communication on the continent is not where it needs to be just yet. Again, in most countries, it's not there, but you do have your standouts like South Africa, Nigeria, Ghana. You do have those countries where people have figured it out, but in a lot of African nations, data and communication is still considered a privilege. It's not something that is made commonplace unless you can actually afford it. So just as a heads up, something else you have to realize with regards to how expensive it is, networking costs money. I'm living in Kinshasa. I am brand new here. I've shared a couple of vlogs where I'm telling you guys about my struggles of, kind of making friends and creating new social networks here. In all honesty, networking is pricey. It gets very expensive, because think about it. If I want to meet up with somebody we're going to meet up at a restaurant. I'm not inviting them to my home, and they're not most certainly gonna invite me to their home, and I'm not gonna allow myself to go and meet somebody at their home unless their home is their office, which I haven't come across yet. But the point is, for you to now go and actually start that networking process, you're going out, you're gonna pay for coffee, pay for lunch, even if you're just paying for your own, all of that is money. And if, for example, you don't have any income, you're just living off of your savings, that starts to deplete very, very quickly. I know people create this persona of, you land and you just start making connections. Yeah, that can happen, but all of those connections come with a price tag attached to them. So just think about that as you're planning your move. Do you already have inbuilt social networks here? Do you already know people? Do the people that you know have extensive networks? Because if they don't, that will mean that, yeah, I can get you to person A, but for you to get to person D, who really will help you get what you need, that's going to be like 2 or 3 lunches deep or 2 or 3 coffees deep. So just be prepared that outside of, double, triple the price of goods, data and communication, outside of networking, all of those things start adding up. Outside of your travel costs, you just need to have a lot of money saved. I don't think I can over stress that. Yeah, so the other price tag or pricier item that people don't really talk about on the continent, you will see a lot of people come on the continent and then they're on holiday. And I was one of those people. When I first came in, I was in Zimbabwe, I was in Tanzania. I was living my best African tourist life. What you don't see is the fact that each ticket costs between $400 to $1,000 US. Yes, I'm going from Kinshasa to Nairobi right now on Ethiopian Airlines. The cheapest ticket you can get is 400 and something US, and the most expensive is over $1,000. Think about that for a second. I've taken a flight from Boston, Massachusetts to Barcelona, Spain, and I paid $300 for that. I'm going from Kinshasa to Nairobi, and I'm paying between $400 and $800. Make this make sense to me, guys. I'm in the same space. You have to understand that aviation is a luxury. This is not something that has been made commonplace by airplane companies like Ryanair in Europe or JetBlue in the States. No, airline travel is still considered a luxury. So you are paying premium, and as well, we don't have like tons of options. There's monopoly between like Kenya Airways or Ethiopian Airways. And I know Kenya just had a new airline called, I think it's Fly Jumbo Jet, and they're a low cost option, but they don't come to Kinshasa. They go to Goma. So I still can't make use of that low cost option. I would still have to fly south to Goma, then get on that flight. So it still ends up adding up. So just something that you have to think about. Just because you see a lot of people land and all of a sudden they're like island hopping, that is not sustainable. That is a facade. Unless your father is Bill Gates or Dangote, I'm just telling you, as an average African, that is not a sustainable lifestyle. If, again, you don't have any income coming in, the money that you have saved is gonna run out pretty quickly. Another thing people don't talk about is the fact that there's unavailability of certain products. In Kinshasa, for example, always pads, I believe I did a couple of vlogs ago where I talked about some of my backups, and always pads, they're not really a thing that you see in Kinshasa, and when you do see them, they're expensive. So everyday goods that you would think you have them between like $7 and $8, they definitely cost double that if you find them. And in most situations, they don't exist. I can tell you that about Kinshasa. There are only certain stores that will carry things like that. And again, all of those will be imported, which means they're carrying an added tax. So just bear in mind that if you're gonna make a move, I will tell you what I did. I packed up a ton of backups. If it was Advil, if it was NyQuil, if it was pads, if it was tampons, if it was band-aids. Like, I packed a ton of backups because I'm not gonna pay twice the amount when I know that I can get the same thing for half. I'm sorry, I'm just not gonna do it. And so knowing that there was unavailability of certain products, I anticipated this and I paid additional storage and additional luggage for these extra backups to be brought with me. And a lot of that stuff I'm still using today. So that's something they never really tell you, is that if there's like a specific medication that you need that isn't found on the continent, I would ask, send a message, Google, see what they have in that country, and then buy the backups. Buy enough to last you at least 6 months, and then make the trip. Because there's nothing worse than having a terrible headache and knowing that nothing on the market can help alleviate that pain. So just think about all of that as you're planning your trip. So the other thing that I have found as something that people don't really talk about a lot of is networking. I touched on it on the financial component, but now I'm going to touch on it on the social component. If you're going to move back to the continent because you're thinking that there are more opportunities here, of which there are, I am one of those people who is here because there are loads of opportunities, especially for young people. Now, if you're somebody like me and you're coming in and you do not have strong social networks, where you say, like, my father's best friend's granddaughter's sister is the minister, like, if you do not have those networks, that means you have to be creating those networks and doing all of that legwork. Now, if you have to do legwork on the business front, as well as legwork on just like the social front, and I don't know about you guys, but like the older you get, the tougher it is to make friends. Can I get an amen? It is so hard to just be like, hi, I'm new here, my name is Benja, do you want to be my friend? Like, cha, I done did that. And it is hard. And I am an extrovert by nature. I've lived on 3 different continents in multiple countries, and never in my life have I had a tougher time at making social connections as I have since I moved to Kinshasa. And it's not for a lack of trying. There's just something about getting older and trying to make friends, you know? I have like 4 or 5 people in like my actual nucleus, and I have loads and loads of friends, and those social connections all left in the States or in Europe, and the ones that I have here on the continent don't live in the Congo. So I had to start making friends from scratch. And again, you guys have seen my vlogs and how I'm reaching out to people and how people are reaching out to me, and how I'm literally doing the work of putting myself out there. If that is not something that you are used to as a person, if that's not something that like you feel that you can do to push yourself out of your comfort zone, I cannot say that you will have success in friendships on the continent, because the amount of effort that it will take for you to actually step out of your comfort zone, continually strive to make these connections a real thing. Because it's one thing when you meet up with somebody, have a nice coffee, and it's like, we'll talk, dies, never see the person again. But you have to continually push, you have to continually set up the next coffee date, set up the next lunch, set up the next hangout, because otherwise nobody's going to do the legwork for you. And honestly, people don't talk enough about how lonely it is when you get here. Think about it, right? Communication is tapped. Like, if you cannot afford to pay $50 to $150 every month for airtime and for data, and pray that the actual internet works so you continually are connected to your friendships, to your friend groups, right? That means you're going to have to encounter issues with communication, where you would have been the most responsive friend, which I used to be. Now you become the friend who people don't hear from for weeks on end. I am that person now. And it's so unfortunate with my friendships, because I have genuinely lost friendships, and I have generally like just disconnected from friends because I physically cannot communicate. And doing the whole catch up, also you end up playing the time difference game where I'm about 5 hours ahead of Boston, and I'm 7 hours ahead of a couple of other places where some of my friends live. Like I have friends in San Francisco that feels like I'm like a day ahead at this point. And in all honesty, trying to like synchronize that timing for, oh, let's talk at this time. We can set the time, but if it rains that day, internet isn't working. If the electricity's gone that day, we ain't chatting. So you end up realizing that like you really do get to a very lonely place because you're struggling to maintain connections, and by all the forces outside of your control, you just can't. And I want people to know that you have to be ready for the friendships that you have existing to change. The social connections that you have will change, and it's never going to be for a lack of trying. It's just going to be by virtue of location. So people don't really talk about how lonely it gets when you move, and I'm going to tell you, I have had many days where I've been incredibly lonely, and it's not like I could pick up the phone and call my friends because time difference, internet's not working, I don't have money, rent out for the month. Like there's so many barriers. So if honestly you're thinking about moving, I would say be prepared for all your friendships to change, all your core relationships to change. And if you're not ready for that, maybe you're not ready for the move. Okay, we're going to talk about a biggie. Corruption. I personally don't even know that we have enough time in this vlog to talk about corruption. I think for me, like I said, I was born, partially raised on the continent. I am very familiar with the idea that policemen will ask you for a little something. I'm not like brand new to the idea that policemen will harass. What I guess I wasn't ready for was the complete disregard for the law, the complete disregard for personhood, especially as a woman, the complete disregard for just you as a person, I think, is what caught me off guard the most with regards to corruption as I've encountered it on the continent, and especially here in Kinshasa. It is so pervasive. I've vlogged about it twice, and you guys have gone through that journey with me of just navigating what it means to be somebody who is like a returnee, navigating corruption back in your home country. And it would be one thing if the police here were just straight up asking for money, and if you said no, they kind of just let you go because clearly they stopped you for no reason, right? But it takes corruption to a whole other level where the entire system is rigged against you, where you as a citizen don't really have a voice, and unless you're well connected, you don't really have recourse unless you're going to be threatening with lawyers, or do you know who I am, or my father is so and so, or I'm related to blah blah blah. Like, unless you have, again, those social connections, you will be struggling so much, because a lot of times people coming from Europe or from the States, you have structure. You know, even though the police is corrupt in one way, you can go off and record on your dash cam, you can make your complaint. If you get a parking ticket, you can have your day in court. Like, all of those systems are in place, and yes, of course, I'm not saying those systems are perfect, but they are in place and you do have recourse. But that's not the case here. I have come to learn that outside of just like praying to sweet baby Jesus, you just don't know who you will get. The idea that the police is here to protect you is not a thing. The police is here to get from you, and I understand why. I understand. However, if you're coming in from outside, people never talk about how hard, or people don't talk enough about how hard it is to make that mental shift where everybody who's engaging with you that is in some type of authority is looking at you for a handout. So for example, you get stopped by the police is going to automatically ask you for money. If you say no, that's automatic arresting. And if you go to their chief, the chief doesn't care. There are no video cameras to say, oh, actually the police is lying. There's no camera, there are no recordings of any sort. It's your word against theirs, and every single time they're going to take the policeman's word over yours. And honestly, this is the one thing that if you cannot deal with that, do not come. Because I want to say that you can brave the winds, but I was super traumatized the first time it happened, and there was no manual, there was no prep. So again, this is Binja telling you, reporting from on the ground. If you're not able to navigate corrupt systems, do not come. It is honestly not the place for you. I would say maybe go to South Africa, go to Namibia. Again, pick your countries. But if you're looking to come to the Congo or some of the Eastern and West African countries, in all honesty, stay home. Do not come, because you will be utterly frustrated by the fact that there are a lot of injustices happening, and you have absolutely no power and absolutely no recourse. So I hope I did not mean to belabor that point, but I am absolutely passionate about it as somebody who has lived through it multiple times. People do not speak about it enough, and I'm just telling you, before you get on that flight, if you don't think you can handle that, do not come. Okay, on the tech front. Now, this is something that bit me in the butt multiple times. So when you set up most of your accounts nowadays, you have two-factor authentication, and I just think that people don't really tell y'all enough about the importance of making sure that that two-factor authentication is turned off if it is connected to a phone number that you will no longer be using. There is nothing more painful than trying to send a security code to a number that is disengaged, disconnected, no longer works. I have been stranded in multiple countries trying to gain access to a Gmail account, an Outlook account, but being unable to do so because I forgot to change phone numbers. So people don't tell you enough that customer service for these really big tech companies is not the greatest, especially if you're not a premium customer. You just being a lonely Gmail account holder, getting assistance on login, take my word for it. You don't want to suffer like me. You do not want to suffer like me, okay? Just deactivate it, or do one better. Download an authentication app. Microsoft has their own authentication app. Google has an authentication app. You have another authentication app called Duo, D-U-O, that you can download. There are multiple variations available. Just make sure you do not get on the plane before having turned off two-factor authentication that is tied to a phone number you will no longer use, or you're going to be screwed. There's really no other way of saying it. Don't say nobody told you. So now I'm going to talk about my more first world problem-y things that people don't talk about. These in the totem pole of importance, super low. Number one, all your streaming services do not work the same or may not even be available. Hulu, not available on the African continent. Netflix has completely different shows available. So if you're thinking, oh, I'm gonna binge watch something in the States and then I'm gonna finish it off on the continent, I would check with somebody local who has Netflix to see if it's still available. Otherwise, just binge watch it where you are. Okay, don't take the risk. Otherwise, you're gonna be left hanging, figuring out like, what happened? How does this show end? Don't be that person. Don't say nobody told you. There are some features on different applications like Instagram that don't work. Here in Kinshasa, Reels don't work. I went to Tanzania, Reels worked perfectly fine. So just depending on the region that you're located, you may or may not have access to some of the features. Like even on Instagram, where you can add music to your stories or add captions to your stories, none of that is available here in Kinshasa. Regional issues, I'm just telling you, prepare yourself. And again, this is why I said I save this for the last. It's at the very end of the totem pole. So if you're like a content creator or an influencer and you're thinking, oh, I'm just gonna make the transition, it's gonna be seamless, I'll create the same type of content, boo-boo, I want to be the first to tell you that you better know whether or not the features you're used to are available. Otherwise, your Instagram is not going to be Instagramming as it needs to. Don't say I didn't tell you, girl. Okay, so we are winding down. The other thing that people don't really talk about is the fact that music is also not available. So I have iTunes, for example, and usually you'll have an album that will drop on a specific day, like Adele's album dropped. And I don't know if you guys follow me on Instagram, like I was waiting to download all her songs like the day, the hour the album dropped. And the message I got was, this music is not available in your country. They didn't want me to enjoy Adele. And I just thought that was unfair because I did nothing to Apple, okay? I pay my Apple bill on time. I deserve Adele. I deserve Adele. I literally had to wait half a day and then all the songs were available in my region. So if you're somebody who's used to kind of latest, greatest right at your fingertips, Africa is about to give you a dose of patience. You understand? So I'm just going to tell it to you as honestly and as straightforward as I can. Do not come with those levels of expectations that you generally have. Once again, if you go to a Namibia, a South Africa, a Kenya, I think those countries you might get it when you want it. But if you come into like the Congo, patience is key. Patience is key. If there's one thing I can leave y'all with, is that you will never be 100% ready to move to Africa. But if you make the appropriate plans, save a ton more than you think you need, probably double what you have saved right now. Realize that communication is going to change. Realize that your friendships are going to change. You will have many, many lonely days. Networking and creating new social connections is going to be tough. Those are just a couple of highlights where I sat back and I thought about it and I thought, you know, what is it that I wish somebody would have told me before I moved back home? And I hope that these really help you guys out. I mean, Africa is wonderful. There's a lot to see. There are tons of opportunities. I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. And if you don't know, now you know. There is a lot to do here on the continent, and if you're young and vibrant and energetic and ready to kind of hustle and grind, you will be absolutely fine. However, just don't make the move without having thought through everything I've shared, because there's nothing worse than having the information available and not taking it and then getting bitten in the butt because you just didn't heed. So I'm gonna leave y'all with that. If you have any questions, any comments, if you agree with what I've said, if you disagree, if you have additional comments, if you have additional information, drop it all in the comments. Let me know what you think. I hope this video was helpful. I hope that you guys have more of an understanding in terms of what it takes to live on the continent. And I'm gonna continue sharing. I mean, I've only been in Kinshasa full time for about 6 months now. So I will continually go through new things and new experiences, and I want to make sure that I share everything with you. It's important for me to share all the low moments as well as all the high moments, so that you don't see me succeeding and shining and thinking, oh my god, it was an overnight success. Like, I am not here for that. I'm here for the journey. I think a lot of times we rush and we don't end up enjoying the journey because we're just looking for that goal. But then when you get to the goal, it's very anticlimactic because you completely skipped all the process steps of the journey itself. So I don't want to skip any of the steps in the journey, which is why I'm sharing this with you. So once again, my name is Binja, also known as the African Cocktail. I hope this video was helpful. I hope it was informative. I hope it was inspirational. I hope it was cautionary. And I encourage you to subscribe to my channel and like this video. The YouTube algorithm relies on the likes to know whether or not to push the video further. So any kind of likes, any kind of support you guys can give me are much appreciated. I love y'all and au revoir. À plus mes amours.